when Labour are in charge of things, they run them very badly. And they end up with no money.
Hang on a second. You know that the reasons for that bankruptcy are not just to do with Labour's management of that council.
I think it largely
back.
There are Tory councillors that have also been bankrupted.
When the Tories were in charge too.
Well, it largely relates to legal fees, consultancy fees. It's been a problem. It's been a Labour-run council, I think, for about 10 years. And illustrates a wider point. Labour runs some quite big authorities in this country. Like, for example, London, like, for example, a whole country, Wales, like, for example, Birmingham. And they've been shown time and time again. This is Labour's real Achilles heel. When they run something, they run it back.
Who runs Northamptonshire County Council?
Wokingham.
Who runs Woking
These
Council?
but Birmingham is Europe's largest council. London
it's
is
not just a Labour
the country's largest local authority. Wales is a whole country. These are time and time again. When Labour runs something, they've been shown to run it badly. And Birmingham illustrates that perfectly.
But there are plenty of Labour councils that are run perfectly well. Obviously, Birmingham, because it's so big, is headline news. But you can't sit there and pretend that there haven't been Conservative councils that have also had exactly the same problems and have run out of money and have had to declare themselves bankrupt.
But these I'm talking here, of course there are other councils as well, and I've been around in politics a long time. I remember my own council, Hammersmith and Fulham. The swap scandal in the 1980s, 1990s, has been a whole series of local authorities. But this is a council, Birmingham, that has had problems for a long time. Keir Starmer put in his own chosen person as Birmingham Council leader earlier this year. Yet still this is a council which is effectively declaring bankruptcy. And this plays into a wider point, going back to the question about the letter, is that Labour have got a long track record of running things badly, running out of other people's money, which was raised with the Prime Minister today at Prime Minister's Questions by Nicola Richards.
So you must be so embarrassed that public debt in this country under a Conservative government is the highest it's ever been.
Well, debt is coming back under control, and a lot of that rose during the pandemic.
2.5 trillion. When you came into power, it was 800 billion.
Well, it's coming back under control. And actually, when you look at the deficit we inherited in 2010, but the point here is that Labour, and this is really Labour's Achilles heel, Iain, going into next year's election, why people at the moment are not flocking to Keir Starmer is they've got deep suspicions about what a future Labour government would mean for running something like the government. They see how Labour runs London, they see how Labour runs Birmingham,
we can
Wales.
expect to see more of you brandishing Liam Byrne's letter.
Well, look, it's been shown, if you don't mind me saying, that actually a lot of people are well aware of that letter, and most importantly is what it means, the wider significance that Labour run things badly when they're in charge of authority.
Charlotte.
I don't think the Conservative Party run things particularly effectively. I mean, if we look, for example, at legal aid and the problems within the justice system, the criminal justice system, the family justice system, it's on its knees. Courts have closed. There's a significant backlog. Rape victims are waiting 4, even 5 years for their case to get to trial. Rape has become decriminalised with only less than 2,000 convictions, despite 1 in 4 women being raped or sexually assaulted. What on earth is the Conservative Party doing about that? The conviction rates have gone down under your leadership. Violence against women and girls is up. I think it's an appalling indictment of the party.
Dan?
Well, again, to answer the question, I mean, is it good politics? Is it bad politics? I mean, it's basically the only politics Greg's got now. I mean, I remember turning up at the 2015 Tory manifesto launch, and the letter was literally like plastered on the wall. It was part of the backdrop to the launch. The reality is, I mean, you know, Greg's again done, you know, an eloquent attack on Labour in Birmingham and elsewhere. But the problem is it kind of feeds into what we were talking about before. There was a period, and we all remember it, there was a period when the Conservatives came into power where they had a good run basically saying, well, I know things aren't working, but it's kind of Labour's fault and we inherited this mess and we're clearing it up. And you can do that for a while as a political party. And you can get some good mileage out of it, and respect to Greg and his party, they have done. But then you cross over, and that's what's happened now. And you're now in a point where people say, do you know what? You've been in power 13 years, and you're blaming this person, you're blaming that person, you're blaming the other person. We don't care. We elected you. You're the guys in charge, you know. And I get why you're doing it, Greg. I understand it. It's like this Labour attack line, Labour bankrupted Birmingham. All people are seeing is councils are going bankrupt. So along with schools are collapsing and the trains aren't running and they're not stopping the boats, councils are going bankrupt, and it's all happening on your watch. And the problem the Tories have got now, especially actually with Rishi Sunak, who is like, his pitch is, I'm the world's greatest project manager. I'm the guy who, I'm not spin, I'm not, blah, 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 I just get things done. People are no longer going to accept, after 13 years in power, rightly or wrongly, excuses for why things aren't happening. They want things to go right. They're not interested in excuses for why things are going wrong.
I mean, I think my view is it's a pathetic excuse. I mean, 13 years.
Well, it might be legit. It might be an entirely legitimate.
Years,
in fairness, it might be an entirely legitimate excuse. The point is, there comes a point politically where it doesn't matter anymore.
But Charlotte, you don't remember the 1980s because you're too young. The winter of discontent was quoted by the Tories. Bear in mind that was 78, 79. That was quoted by Greg's predecessors like Norman Tebbit would come out with that back at 1988, 1989, 1990. So this is not a new thing.
But if I might, what we're talking about is what's happening today. Actually, Labour have been in charge of Birmingham for 10 years. Labour have been in charge of London for the last 7 years. Labour have been in charge of Wales for the last 25 years.
So you've been in charge of the country for 30 years.
Okay, but what I'm talking about is...
And people are saying...
The point here is where Labour are in charge of something.
But Greg, the point is... And people are saying, look, if you're basically saying now, we've been in charge in 13 years... but we can't deal with these issues because Labour's messing up.
No, I'm not saying...
They're thinking, well, what's the point? What's the
Dan, that is
why we voted?
When Labour are in charge, they don't run things well. I'm making a very simple, straightforward
And you know what else this day is? It's a year since Liz Lettuce Truss, who, as a result of her cavalier policies, have put hundreds, if not thousands, of pounds on people's mortgage bills. I mean, I'm sorry, we are now at the point where it used to be the case, perhaps, once upon a time, when people might look at the Conservative Party and think, OK, I don't like everything they do, but you can probably trust them with money. I genuinely don't think that the Conservatives, after the debacle of the last year and how people are feeling and what they are having to do to make ends meet, that people can credibly look at the Conservative Party and say that anymore. So I'm sorry, but I think Dan's completely right. They've got nothing left, that they've got to hark back to 13 years ago.
I disagree. That is also out of date. I mean, what we have seen, particularly with the economic data being revised...
Are you saying that people's mortgages haven't gone up?
The economic data being revised is actually the UK is the best performing G7 country in
You're
Europe.
so out of touch, Greg.
That's last week's economic data.
You are so out of touch.
You're a year out of date. I'm talking last week's economic revised data.
And I'm talking about the doors I knocked on last week.
Britain is actually the best recovering major economy in Europe.
Greg, you are so out of it.
You try telling that to somebody who rings into this show day after day saying, well, OK, we may be the fastest growing economy. That's the macro side. I'm giving you the micro side, my experience. My mortgage has got... I'll give you my experience. My mortgage has gone up £1,000 a month. Now, I'm lucky in that I can afford to do that. But if I was on an average salary, I would not be able to...
No, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry. If this whole exchange, I'm sorry, Greg, you are so out of touch.
You're a year behind.
You are so out of touch. No, you are on a different planet.
I'm talking about a week
ago. The experience of people in this country does not bear up to what you're saying. So some sort of revision in past tense.
It's a very important set of revision.
The economy. Well, you tell it to my constituents who contact me, who are looking at leaving their houses because they aren't able to afford their mortgage, because they are now going to food banks because they can't afford to put food on the table for their children. I'm sorry. The Conservative Party from top to bottom has lost touch with people and reality.